Okay, so plot twist, I got both the radiator, the fan, and the system reboot liquid. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. This is the same day I even started filming this video series, so this is probably going to be part 2. So this is going to go over converting this cryo-cooled system into a regular air-cooled system and the system flush that's going to go with it. Now I have to do this system flush for 24 hours before I even get started with the next project. So I'm just going to get this going and then I'm going to let it sit and run for 24 hours. Okay, so now I just have a loop going into the bowl. Hopefully it's going to flush out a little bit of the stuff that's in here. I may have to help it along, but I'm going to let that cycle itself through for, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and check on it. So it's basically flushed out. There's no more green stuff in it. So I'm going to go ahead and add this System Reboot Loop Cleanser into a gallon of distilled water. First, I'm just going to pour this into my pump reservoir combo here. Okay, the cleaner is in the pump reservoir. Pour a little bit inside of the pump reservoir. And that's basically full. And it is pumping through. So now we need to let this go for 24 hours. I'm going to turn the pump up a little bit. This thing really kicks when it needs to. And hopefully all this gunk will be gone. Okay, so I've let this thing run for 24 hours, from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. the next day, and it hasn't really done much of anything. All the tubing still has residue in it. We're gonna have to take a bit more drastic measures. I have more tubing, so I'm basically just going to reroute all of the lines to this new radiator, and Bob's your uncle. That should be it. At least hopefully the pump is clean. I'm gonna go through and clean the water block out as well. I'm waiting for some extra tubing because the tube that I got isn't quite long enough to fit to the fitting, so I had to order a little bit more. Now, in that time, I was doing a little bit of research, and once taking this off, I realized that all of that debris inside of my tubing was galvanic corrosion because I was using copper stuff mixed with aluminum stuff. While this was a sealed system all on its own, and I believe all of the parts on this were aluminum, this was now mixed with other components. So I believe the inside of these blocks is completely hollowed out at this point. So what I'm going to do is remove these aluminum cooling blocks, and I am going to replace them with copper ones. Now, I've never taken these off before, so this will be the first time I'm doing that. So I'm going to start with the old one. This is the Eliminator. This is the Free Zone Elite. This one's pump went out a long time ago. This one's pump is still going strong to this day. The only thing I've had to do is replace a couple of the tubes, and that's it. Otherwise, this thing has been going strong since 2006. So, that being said, I am going to take off some of the Tex or Peltier devices from this one just so I can see what I'm going to be getting myself into when I take them off for this one. Let's unplug this. Because I'm assuming I'm going to need either paste or glue. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. I'm assuming it's some sort of glue. So it looks like they just had some thermal paste inside of there at one point, and they are glued, so I won't be able to remove the actual Tex, but that's good to know that I can take off the actual cooling panels without it affecting anything, and then just apply a little bit of thermal grease when I go to put them back on. Good to know. And that's a good thing anyway, because this thing really needs a deep cleaning. As you can see, it's pretty filthy. It's got sticker residue from the side panel that fell off of it. I'd like to possibly clean up the wiring a little bit and get it ready for those copper blocks when they actually get here. And so that's that for now. Basically at this point I'm waiting for a different radiator for this because the one I got was aluminum, and I need to change that out to copper because it has a copper water block, as well as the tubing that I did not get enough of. Got her all cleaned up, looking fresh, got all the sticker residue off on both sides, got the fan cleaned up, and now I just need to wait for parts. So I got my correct radiator in, one that's made of copper and not aluminum. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started because I really need to get this rig back up and going because this is my editing computer and it's been down for quite some time. I already missed a scotch and a beer yesterday because of it. The new fan and radiator is in, looking fresh. Okay, so like I said, I really needed to get this thing back up and running. I applied some thermal paste to the CPU. I got everything looped in. Hopefully there's no leaks. I'm gonna have to shine a flashlight in here and see because the fitments are really tight. The hose that I ordered did not come in when it was supposed to. I will blame the holiday rush on that one. That's okay. And yeah, I just need to mix up some coolant and toss it in. Gonna be going with the Primo Chill True, just because it's neon yellow and that's my jam. So basically you just take this bottle and you empty it into the gallon, you shake it up, and Bob's your uncle. Ooh, that's my jam. I do not have a funnel, so I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Then that looks good. Okay, moment of truth. I am gonna have to cycle this a few times. It doesn't seem to be leaking anywhere. So that's a good thing. Got a lot of air bubbles to cycle out. Gonna have to let this run for quite a bit to get all those little air bubbles out. But so far, so good. So I've got everything up and running. The system is being bled as we speak. I'm gonna have to leave it running overnight to get all of the air bubbles out, but so far, so good. I've also popped on Prime 95 right away to get the temperature up and see if there's anything that I need to address immediately. Right now it's been running for about 15 minutes and it's capped out at around 44 degrees Celsius, which isn't bad, but it's definitely not as good as the cryo cooler. And this tank is noticeably hotter than it ever has been in the past. With the cryo cooler, it was always cold to the touch. So there's a big difference there. But like I said, so far so good, no leaks, and I can get back to editing some damn videos. I will say that the system is noticeably quieter. That fan that is on the cryo cooling rig was constantly going, and that thing pushes some CFM, so it is a loud fan. Now with the Noctua on there and the one radiator, it is silent. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard this computer so quiet before. Even with the water pump and 5 case fans going, this thing is pretty silent. I'm actually not even mad, I'm impressed. So once I let the air bubbles all bleed out of the system, I did say I was going to do some benchmarks. So here those are. As you can clearly see, the cryo cooler on the left at idle was sitting at around 21 degrees Celsius and just kind of chills there. With the just water to air, the one radiator, the one fan, it is idling over 10 degrees higher. It's 11 degrees higher at 32 degrees Celsius, just chilling. Nothing else is running. There may be some stuff running in the background. This is exactly what I wanted to see. It's cryo cooling versus straight up air to water cooling, and there is a 10-degree difference right off the bat. Now moving on to Prime 95, after it had been running for 15 minutes, the CPU temperature had reached 32.9 degrees Celsius, which is just about 12 degrees over what it sat at idle, which is a fantastic number. Prime 95, for those of you that don't know, maxes out the cores and the processes and everything doing mathematical equations, and it is a real CPU killer. So to see a low number like this just maxing out Prime 95 is fantastic. Let's move on to the water. Again, after running Prime 95 for 15 minutes and kind of letting it settle out, it wasn't getting any hotter and it wasn't getting any cooler. So the CPU was coming in at around 46.5 degrees Celsius, which is a huge difference between the cryo cooling and the water cooling. It's also a huge difference between the idle and the full pegged status with just the water versus with the cryo cooling. So all in all, cryo cooling does make a gigantic gigantic difference. So I'm really stoked that I'm going to incorporate both into my next build. Now here's where things got a little bit crazy. I let both the cryo cooler and the air to water cooler have 5 minutes after running Prime 95 to get back down to temperature. And there was a gigantic difference in how quickly and how much this actually affected the difference in temperatures. Because the cryo cooling fan was basically at 100% for about 10 minutes after the whole Prime 95 ordeal, it brought the CPU temperature down to 14.5 degrees Celsius. That's 58.1 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really cold, my guys. Now, the water to air cooler did do a good job of bringing the temperatures back down. It just wasn't quite as drastic as the cryo cooler. The water to air got it back down within 5 minutes to 29.4 degrees Celsius, which is still admirable, but just not as cool as the damn cryo. Now, because of these results, I am going to ditch the old fan on the cryo cooler in exchange for one that is going to pull double the CFMs. So I want to be able to control that when I really want to and really get my PC cooled. I don't want to cool it to the point where the water block starts to sweat and drip water everywhere, but I do want to cool it to the point where it's in the single digits when I want it to be. In closing, the cryo has a clear advantage over the water to air. It had an 11 Celsius difference at idle. It had a 13.6 difference Celsius during Prime 95 and a whopping 14.9 degrees Celsius difference during the 5-minute cooldown after running Prime 95. So super stoked to have gotten these tests done. Can't wait to do this on the new rig with the cryo combined with the air to water. So that's that. And lastly, I ran the superposition benchmark test, which is not technically a CPU test, but I wanted to see where my PC hung out in the first place. With the cryo cooling, like I said, doesn't matter for the graphics card, it was a 5254. And for the water cooled only, it was a 5248. So literally no difference that's actually usable was determined between those two. What was interesting is how far down the list this almost 7-year-old graphics card is. I was right around mid-pack on the last page. I think there was only 10 that were below this. So can't wait to upgrade the graphics card and actually maybe make it a little higher up on that list. And I believe that is going to be it. This is probably the second, possibly the third, maybe the fourth video in this PC build series. But this was just getting my old PC back up and running. Thanks for watching. And this is Officer Dan catching you on the flip side.